from the front door, this blue-white entity, tall blue-white entity, about 6 to 7 feet tall, just kind of walked and glided toward me. And
There's a force in all of us that science knows nothing about, the force of
Welcome,
fear.
everyone, to Induced Fear. I'm your host, Oscar. With me, I have Leslie and Stephen Shaw. They are the authors of Who They Are and What They're Up to. It's a book you guys put together. I don't know how long it took. How long did it take you guys to put this
Like
book
20
together?
years or so of research.
but a solid year of actual writing.
Yeah, took a,
So
a, a full year to write it.
Yeah.
And it started, about 18 years ago, really. I I saw my first UFO, and Stephen has had a long history of seeing the stuff before me, and also of the alien abduction phenomenon that we believe happened to his family.
it's
But 2005 was my first, and that's about the moment I said, we've got to write a book, and then the real actual research began.
yeah, the idea was kind of sparked there. We didn't actually sit down and say we got to write a book back in 2005. We
No, but we started reading a lot more and studying a lot more, uh, and
well it
watching every show
Yeah,
ever
but,
made
it
about the
brought a
subject.
lot of things that I had already researched to the surface about my 3 generations of my family of weirdisms that have been happening for 3 generations. So
Yeah,
it was basically a project that coalesced over a long period of time. So it's not
yeah,
something we just got into our idea, just like the idea, let's write a book right now. It's something that was a work in progress for a long time. And then we decided to say, okay, time's up. We need to write about it now. So it was, it was partly self-discovery and partly that we just needed to do it.
yes.
Yeah.
And I
And
have to issue
this is
a.
just a
Oh, sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
you're okay. I was just saying this is just like you guys just explaining it is one of the things that got me excited from when you had messaged me. Um,
Yeah.
so I am thrilled to have you guys on.
Thanks so much for
So,
having
of
us.
course,
And
welcome to
hi,
the
hi
show.
everyone out there.
Uh, and I wanted to ask before, when you guys, I don't know, how long have you guys been together?
28 years.
28 years. And when you guys first started talking, was this like a subject that you guys really spoke
No,
about to each other? No.
no,
Oh,
not at
No,
all.
it was. Stephen doesn't really tell these stories about his abduction experiences
Well,
to people he doesn't know well. And
at
so
the
after I had to get to know him for a while before he told me.
at the time, I wasn't even considering it to be abduction theories. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
it didn't even enter my mind. That's what I'll go ahead and explain when we get into that. Why I didn't think they were abductions at all.
Yeah, the family, the whole family in his
Well,
side
yeah.
experienced bizarre phenomenon. The thing is that uh, they would see something strange, and then there would be a blackout period of time, and then somebody else in the family would see something bizarre, and there would be a blackout period of time right after it. And this is kind of the signature for the alien abduction phenomenon. Um, and then they tamper with memory, and there's frequently these blackout periods right after spotting something unusual or strange. And but Stephen's brother Philip, when he was 16, he actually saw a 6 foot tall gray alien in his room right before blacking out.
1982.
And this was when we started surmising that, okay, that is what's going on. That's the the cause of this bizarre phenomenon that's going on in the family.
But again, we didn't surmise that until we started actually writing the book and doing our research. At the
Yeah,
time, Philip was not. Philip was 6 years younger than me, and again, this phenomenon has followed myself to 6 different homes, and has followed my family bloodline to Germany, to England, to different parts of California, different
Wow.
areas. So this is. I was brought up with the idea from being very young that we had this family protector called Oglegli that would manifest and show up at certain times to either help people along, save people's lives, or just near death or whatever it may be. So I was brought up in a very strict British household that My parents had gone through wartime England as children
But
in
they'd
northern
immigrated to
England.
California.
In
He's from
northern England,
California.
so in northern England, they were, they saw a lot of brutality. They grew up no nonsense people, basically very, very, oriented that way. But I was born here in California in 1960. My parents moved to California in 1956. So I was actually, I'm basically, we joke around because I was born in Encino Hospital that used to exist at that time. So they called me Encino Man.
He's the Encino
So
Man,
I was one of the last. I
yeah.
was one of the last to be born in that hospital in Encino. So, but we never talked about aliens because that wasn't even an issue. I came from a very psychic family. My mom and her mother and her mother's sister practiced automatic writing and spiritualism and things like that in England, and they learned that stuff from their parents that grew up in Germany, the Newmans. So my mother's maiden name was Rowe, and I looked up the name Rowe. It means the tall red-headed ones, which is interesting. And Newman
That is.
basically means new man, or new iteration of man. So we started to kind of looking at what was happening to me with the missing time stuff and my brother. And over a period of time, I started to question the idea about the spirit guide actually being an alien intervention or alien, uh, basically alien intervention or influence. And it really
Mm.
started to explain a lot more of the things that were happening that were unexplainable.
And also the research we were doing that was pointing to uh, the abduction phenomenon. At first we looked at it and we were thinking it's the theories going around at the time were that the aliens just want to take a cross section of humanity. They just want some samples. It's scientific curiosity, and that's all it is. But then we found that that was not what was happening. What was happening was that they would find a specific DNA strain that they liked for whatever reason. It met with their
Criterion.
criteria, and then they would prey on that person again and again and again and again and again through their lives, taking them almost like they were harvesting a product from that person. And then they would start taking their children and their grandchildren and so on. And that's why the phenomenon tends to span multiple generations in
and
families.
and bloodlines, family bloodlines.
Also,
Yeah.
another thing that points to it not being the theories of just a cross section of humanity is that about 9 out of 10, or maybe a bit more than that, humans that are taken, abductees, are Caucasian. And Caucasians only make up about
16 16% of,
16% of the
yes,
population of the
of the
world,
world's population, 16%.
but we're the primary targets of the abduction phenomenon. And in our book, we have a lot of theories as to why that might be.
It's
But
factual based theories as far
yeah,
as statistics
Yeah.
and stuff not just taken off of social media that you can't back up, actually scientifically, verifiable things,
and that they need
stats.
they need large quantities of genetically proper, or what they're after, DNA mostly Caucasian people for this bizarre breeding program that they're doing. Believe me, when I started researching the breeding program, I said, God, this couldn't be stranger if I was making it up.
Yeah.
But uh, the more we looked, the more we saw about 10% of abductees are women that claim that they've been impregnated by aliens with a hybrid alien baby, and then 4 months later they're taken again and the fetus is stolen, and then later, years later, sometimes they're introduced to their hybrid offspring. They're taken again and introduced their hybrid
In some
offspring.
cases, yes.
And in some cases this happens more than once in a woman's life. One woman I remember particularly, this had happened to her 4 times. Her four of her children just stolen away. So they're using us as
Incubators.
incubators,
Yeah.
and when the people are introduced to their children, they're definitely hybrids. They're like the Greys or the insectoids or whoever was taking them, but they're also
They're telepathic
like
too.
half human, right? And they can communicate telepathically as
And
well.
the interesting thing, because of course, with the science and medicine coming into the forefront a lot more, a lot of these women have had ultrasounds, and the curious thing is that it seems to be when the
Right.
fetus reaches about the 5 centimeter mark as far as size, which is about the size of a standard American baseball. The fetus will be taken, the placenta and everything, all the blood packaging and all that, and the obstetricians will say, as far as I can tell, I know you're pregnant. We have the ultrasounds here,
From
but
when you were.
but as far as if you were to come into my office right now, as far as I would be concerned, you were never pregnant.
It looks
There's
like
no
the
signs, no
womb is
signs.
completely vacuumed out. Like they take all the placenta and all everything with the fetus
In
when
in a
they steal
way
it,
in a way that's not harmful to either the fetus or the mother, which is the important part.
Right. And
Yeah,
so
because
we
there's no
think that
sign of
this
trauma.
No sign of trauma.
right,
Yeah.
and no injury, and we think in Stephen's case that this family protector, this O'Glegley spirit guide, may have been one of these, say, alien handlers monitoring this particular strain of DNA that they liked, Stephen and his family. And they kept taking them again and again. Like, what was the first time that you were taken? The when you were 8, right? You believe when you're walking
Oh,
down the
yeah, when I was
hallway.
8 yeah, when I was 8 or 9, yes, I was sleeping in a bunk bed on the top bunk bed at that time in my life. This would have been 1969, 1970, and I heard this odd sound in the middle of the night, always in the middle of the night, and I knew it wasn't the dog because I knew the sounds the dog made, so something just felt odd to me. So I I got out of the bed and I started walking down the hallway. And for some reason, I was extremely nervous. I remember my heart pounding and my eyes dilating, and I was walking very carefully. And I was in adrenal state. So when you're in adrenal state, you're awake. Okay, you're not going to be going to sleep very quickly after that. And I was just getting ready to make a right turn into the living room, and then I just blackout. And next thing I know, it was a few hours later, I was back in the top bunk bed, all tucked in, and just as calm as anything. But I have no recollection as far as what had happened.
Yeah,
Now, this
and it kept happening that way to the family
a
members
few
again and
years,
again.
yeah, a few years later, when my brother, he's dead now, but when my brother, he was 6 years younger than me, at about the age of 5 or 6, he started sleeping in the closet. And I asked Philip, I said, Philip, why are you sleeping in the closet? And he said, well, I'm afraid of the little men that come in the night. And curiously, when I was about his age, I had a vague memory of seeing these like shimmery figures of like they look like what you consider to be garden gnomes that were entering our room at the time. And they were like maybe 4 or 5 of them, and they literally look like little garden gnomes. And then I either went back to sleep or blacked out, whatever.
I
So
mean, are you likely, if you see gnomes in your room, are you likely to just drift back off?
well, I was
No, right?
scared.
Well, my point
I
is
was
that he didn't just drift back off. Suddenly, his memory stops
Well,
again.
I have,
Yeah.
I either drifted back off or I turned over. I remember turning over now. I turned over back onto my left side because it was weird. I was just hoping, like a kid thinks, just go away,
Maybe they'll
just
go
go away,
away if
Yeah.
I
you
turn
know.
over.
So yeah, but my brother had repeated interactions apparently, and
Yeah,
he
let me
just
tell
did.
his triple
Go
story
ahead,
there.
go
Yeah,
ahead. Yeah, sure.
he these occurrences frequently happen in clusters
Different house too, by
and
the
in
way.
different houses.
Mm.
In Stephen's case, he had a cluster of things that happened when he was 18, and I'll let him tell those. But Philip, because he's gone now, he he was we think he was very traumatized by these events from his childhood, and he never had what you'd call a normal, emotionally mature life. You know what I mean? He was brilliant, but he ended up um, dying in a gruesome murder suicide in our family. He killed his mother with a shotgun and his 2 cats and himself. And we think he just snapped one day, and we don't know if it had anything to do with his early trauma from the abduction phenomenon, but we think it might have because he kind of had emotionally he had PTSD rather his whole life. It seemed to us, never had a relationship or
He became fibromyalgic too,
yeah,
you know.
became ill, and but anyway, when he was 16 years old, he had a cluster of 3 incidents happen. he was sleeping in his bedroom in Sonora, and his bedroom faced the creek. So it was down a slope, was a creek, and then a hilltop on the other side, and forest, solid forest. So no possible. It couldn't have been a road in the distance or
No.
a house back there. There was nothing back there but a hillside of forest. And he saw these incredibly intense white lights. It woke him up in the middle of the night, these two bright white lights right outside his window. And he was staring at them, trying to figure out what the heck could that be. And a few seconds later, he again blacks out and can't remember a thing. Then the very next night, he was in bed and he heard this scrabbling sound on the floor next to him, and he thought it was a cat, one of the house cats. And so he reached down to pet the cat, and instead of a cat, what happened was is a, a hand grabbed his arm like that,
Grabbed his wrist.
and he again blacked out. And then the third night was that one I was telling you about before. He rolled over in bed, awakened, and he saw a 6 foot tall gray alien standing in the doorway of his bedroom, which was close to his bed. It was a small bedroom. And then he immediately blacked out again.
And this happened when he was 16. My occurrences happened when I was 18. At the occurrences with my brother Philip, they were happening in the house that my family was building because we were contractors and cabinet makers. My dad was trained in England. He was old school, so we were doing the whole thing ourselves. So it wasn't a house that we inherited. So, but anyway, what happened to me also was experienced by my whole family, all five of us, during this 1 week period back in January of 1979. So the very first night of these weird occurrences was my dad when he got up to to get breakfast. He said that, Stephen, my closet doors opened and closed on me during the night. And I just thought at first that he was joking and whatnot. I said, well, maybe he was like having a dream or something. I didn't really take it too seriously, but he said no, he opened and closed on me when I was awake. And I said, okay. So anyways, the next night I was reading this book by Paramahansa Yogananda called Metaphysical Meditations. I remember that because I was just starting to study Tai Chi, which I was also a teacher of for 23 years, and I was very much into his Paramahansa's teaching. So I gave my dad this book to read about 9 o'clock at night because I was enjoying it. And about half an hour later, he came back into my room with this kind of shocked expression on his face, and he said, "Stephen, I'm hearing a silver bell in the wall." Well, he knew being a lifelong musician that I knew what the sound of a silver bell was. So I said, "Okay." So I went into the living room. It's about 9:30 at night, and sure enough, it was the sound of the silver bell being ting ting, just like in the song, silver bells, silver bells. So, anyways, so then we both looking at each other and said, "Well, let's get Karen." So my sister's 5 years younger than me. She's 13 at the time. Got my sister out of her room, and she said, "That's a silver bell." So anyway, so we were trying to make sense out of it, trying to be logical and looking up the chimney, up the flue, banging on the wall, thinking, what is it, a squirrel that somehow got in and is moving around a bell? Trying to make any type of common sense out of it. And
Yeah,
it
to
went on for
explain it
about
in some way.
they're trying to, explain it, yes. So anyways, it went on about for about 15 minutes and then it stopped. So the next morning, my mom called from the house we were building in Sonora, California, which is 350 miles away, and just to say hi because that's what we did. So my mom said that, about 9 o'clock last night, I answered the phone and Philip said that the phone didn't ring, but I heard this ringing and I picked up the phone and somebody on the other side in a male's voice said, "I am the invisible Beachy," or something like that. And I talked to my brother and my brother said, "No, no, no. The phone didn't ring, but my mom did pick up the phone." So anyways, the
But she
same
heard,
kind of
so she heard a ring in her
Yeah,
head
the
right.
same
somehow. Yeah,
Yeah,
same
yeah.
type
right.
of
So
bell.
the same kind of thing happening in two different locations, 350 miles apart at the same time. So then the next night I went to bed in my bedroom. This I wasn't sleeping on the top bunk at the time. I was just sleeping on the bottom bunk, and I was awakened by this again in the middle of the night by this whoosh, whoosh, just like that. This like 3 times a whizzing
A
sound in the air.
whirly,
And
willy
I
sound,
thought,
yeah.
was it somebody put a fan on, or, or was there a bug in the room or something? Looked down the hallway, there was a little light on the kitchen I could kind of see, and there was nothing there. So I went back to sleep, trying to go back to sleep on my left-hand side, and then the bed was pushed twice from the base of the bed, two distinct shoves, just boom, boom. Not real hard, just, letting me know. But I thought, well, hell, we live in, Southern California. Maybe it was a little earthquake,
Yeah, that
something like
Yeah.
that.
happens.
So then I continued to try and go back to sleep, and then it pushes stronger, but again in two. And then it pushes a third time even stronger. At this point, I am feeling both annoyed and scared, okay? And I'm just trying to ignore whatever it is. And then I get three distinct taps on the middle of my deltoid, which is just below the shoulder bone. Just tap, 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 like somebody is tapping me with an index finger. And at this point, I'm really getting scared, but I'm also really aggravated. So I rolled over as quick as I could, deciding to confront whatever it is, and I say, "What?" And and then I felt a presence there. I couldn't see anything, and then I just blacked out. And then I told my dad about it in the morning, but I don't have any sense of what happened between when I was tapped on the shoulder and said what, and
Yeah.
then what time frame. Now the next day, I decide that, I'm not sleeping in that room again. So I decided I'm going to just sleep in my work clothes, and I'm going to sleep on the couch in the living room. And I awoke again. This is January, so it was dark. I woke about 5:30 in the morning, and I just kind of looked over to my piano, my upright piano, and thought what music I was going to play that day. And then I listened to the little fountain in the other room. So I was awake, I was alert, but I was comfortable. I didn't want to get up. It was too early anyway. And from behind me, from about 25 feet from behind me, from the front door, this blue white entity, tall blue white entity, about 6 to 7 feet tall, just kind of walked and glided toward me. As it glided toward me in about a second and a half to 2 seconds, the whole room, it literally felt like the whole house was filled with this intense blue white light. It stopped by my right side, and as it stopped by my right side, the whole right side of my body, like it was bisected down the center, just became, I couldn't move it. It was paralyzed, not in a scary way, but just I could not move it. Okay. And it bent down. I felt it bent down to my right ear, and it said in a whisper into my ear, not in my head, it said, kind of like that. I couldn't tell whether it was male or female, but it was definitely a voice.
Okay.
And I was thinking, "Oh my god, I'm gonna see the family spirit guide called O'Glegley that people have talked to me about." And I was like saying, "Oh man, I'm gonna actually meet O'Glegley." But then the other half of me is saying, "Dude, you are paralyzed. You
Yeah.
can't move. Doesn't matter what you wanna do, you can't move." So I was 50-50 mix of being scared and being excited. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, it lasted for, it felt like 10 to 15 seconds, then it unbent from bending over towards me and left. And,
In our book,
something like that happens,
in our book, at this point, he says he went to tell his father, but upon more careful reflection, he realizes he has no clear memory of going to tell his father. Like
right.
again, there was a small memory lapse after the event.
I did tell him at breakfast, but regardless, the really interesting part of this is 6 hours later, it was 11:30 in the morning, and I decided to reach into my right-hand side pocket to pull out whatever change I had, because I wanted to go down to Jack in the Box and get some food for my dad and I. And I pulled out the coins, standard American coins, put them on the table, and all the coins were magnetic. They were all magnetized. Okay. The nails, I had some six-penny nails, but all the coins I had, the quarters and the nickels and the dimes and the pennies, they were all, I could pick them up with each other. Okay.
And that's supposed to be
Yeah.
impossible. American coins are
Yeah.
specifically designed so
I
you can't
yeah.
they can't be magnetized, so they can
Yeah.
be going in vending machines.
You had a question there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just saying almost like if the matter was kind of changed in that moment with the energy there,
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's almost like, yeah,
this was 6 hours after my encountering the being, okay? This is a full 6 hours, and my dad could do the same thing, he could pick him up too, and it just wasn't making any
We
sense,
thought it was like
okay?
maybe a strong electromagnetic
We
field
don't
he'd
know
been
whether it's
exposed
plasma
yeah,
or
to.
electromagnetic, we
And
don't know.
that would explain also the paralysis, because human beings are electrical beings. So if
yeah.
we're exposed to an overload of power, maybe that would kind of take us offline, sort of, and
Yeah,
paralyze us.
that's what I thought when you explained the light that came with this
Mhm.
being. I
Right,
pictured it as the energy of
right.
the
Yeah.
being kind of encompassing the room.
Right, and then the very last night, which I have no memory of at all, my dad was awakened, and again in the middle of the night, was awakened, and my bedroom, my dad's bedroom were separated by a hallway, but you could look down the hallway, directly into my bedroom and vice versa. And he saw this wall of blue white light that was just enveloping my room,
Yeah, spilling out into the
spilling
hallway
out,
from
okay,
his room.
and his first instinct was, I want to get up and see what this is. And a voice in his head, not a voice from outside, a voice in his head said, "Go back to sleep, Jeffrey. Everything's fine, nothing to see here." And he went back to sleep. He told me about it in the morning, but that was the last of the events of that particular week that happened. But on that particular night, I have no clue. I have no memory at all of being awakened by any type of an entity.
And
So
so we think he was taken maybe many times, that
I
that
have
he
no
didn't have an
idea.
inkling of it,
Right.
instead of just some of the times where he woke up during it, or while or right before it was happening, he was still partly awake. We think
Yeah.
we tried to break through this block, the mental block of that Stephen has, blacking out
Through
those
hypnosis.
memories, and we haven't been
Yeah.
able to do so. It's not as easy as people make it sound. You have to find
It's
a
probably just
therapist you
slow chipping
trust,
away.
and yeah,
You have to find somebody that you trust for one thing, and then
Yeah.
some that also has experience and and believes you and actually can. Probably, the only time I've ever truly been hypnotized was on my 19th birthday, July 28th,
so we know it
1979.
can be
So
done. We
I
know it
know,
can be
I
hypnotized.
know, it was at the Pat Collins Hip Hypnotist Club that used to be on Sunset and Doheny. She would do, she'd do shows. Okay, so
Yeah,
I was there and I got on stage. She did 9 of us at the same time, and I personally didn't believe that I could be
but
hypnotized. And
she did a good job. Yeah, I
sure
wish she
enough,
was still working.
she had us all hypnotized, and it was weird. It was like feeling like a veil was coming down from my forehead over my eyes, and it was amazing. We did the typical thing, like stiff as a board, light as a feather, and not
Yeah.
being able to feel pain and that kind of stuff. And it was both. It was amazing, quite frankly. It was really amazing.
So as we started doing our research, uh, I noticed that the um, the phenomenon is actually but much wider, worldwide phenomenon than people realize. There are approximately 10,000 sightings per year worldwide,
Yeah.
and
But that's a lot more.
we figure that reporting is only about 10%. So that means they're really being seen like 100,000 times a year, and because of that, and also because I started examining sketches and drawings that people have made of the Greys over the years, I realized that they are a lot of this Hollywoodism that exaggerates them into monsters is kind of not true. They almost look like 10-year-old children. They walk perfectly upright like we do. They're smaller than we are. They're very, very pale. And they have a little bit larger of a head than we do, and much larger and blacker eyes. And I realized that over the time that I was looking at something that resembled a human being more than anything else. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the closest relative we have on this planet, the bonobo chimps species, and they look nothing like us. They can't stand perfectly upright. They can't walk very well upright. When they're frightened, they run away on all fours or and take to the trees. they're definitely uh, we have a lot more in common physically with the Greys than we do with our other closest relative on the planet. And the
Yeah.
Nordic aliens are reported as being indistinguishable from Swedes. You know, they're
Yeah.
tall, white, blue-eyed,
I
green-eyed
was just gonna
humans.
bring
You
that up.
know,
Yeah.
and then
Yes.
we had the evidence too of the hair of the alien. Did you ever hear about the hair of the alien?
I don't
It's a
believe so.
it's an very interesting story. This guy in Australia woke up in the middle of the night and he had a woman straddling him.
Again, you have to suspend a little belief for this because anyway, go ahead, Leslie.
Okay. So this woman is having sex with him, you know, and there's another woman in the room. She's looks a little bit more Asian. The woman that was having sex with him was white haired with normal eyes, but a little too large, and
Yeah.
sharp cheekbones and sharp chin. And put her hand on her stomach and then pointed to the sky. And after this encounter, this sexual encounter he has with these two women, the next morning he finds a white hair in bed with him. And he gets this thing DNA tested and analyzed. And it turns out to be absolutely clear. And that is an unknown type to human beings. But the
Yeah.
DNA came back testing as human, but very bizarre human. It was part Gaelic, part Basque, part Chinese,
Very,
and
very rare Chinese
a
too.
very rare small segment of the Chinese population, about 1% from that particular, say, tribe of people. And also, it was clear, absolutely clear, and that is an unknown in the world of the human hair type.
In the genome
Yeah, it's
population,
just never
yes.
happened before.
Yeah.
So we know we're dealing with what we think are cousins. So the space aliens, in our opinion, are not from distant star systems. They're from here in our own solar system, and they split off from us thousands and thousands of
Yeah,
years
we
ago.
go into it much more in depth in the book. I mean, we're just like, we're
Right.
kind of skimming the surface with this
Yes,
podcast we're doing. So let people know
in a
that
nutshell, kind of thing.
we
Yeah.
have a lot of the data to back it up. So in the
Right.
book,
But it started making so much more sense. That makes sense why they're seen so often. That
right?
makes sense why they can breed with us so
Like
easily.
in like in like in like in,
You
in
know?
like in medicine, when I was an acupuncturist and Chinese medical doctor for 20 years, one of the first things you learn in medicine when you're dealing with somebody is look when you hear hoofbeats, look for horses first and not zebras. And
Yeah.
a lot of people are actually looking for zebras first instead of
Yeah.
Instead
looking
of
for the horses.
horses.
So what we strove to do with our book is to look at it from the standpoint that it probably is a horse most of the time.
I did want to clear up a
So
mistake that we made in the book. We attributed, see, we believe that this separation of the human species happened about 13,000 years ago when at the same time as the Clovis people were wiped out and the mastodons and the mammoths and there was an extinction event in North America about 13,000 years ago. And we surmised that then the Hiawatha asteroid impact crater was discovered right where we were expecting the crater to be, and we attributed that to be the cause. But since then, that one has been discounted, and it's been dated to 58 million years ago, not 13,000 years ago. But just 500 miles away from the others on the other side of the Labrador Sea from the one we thought was Hiawatha, we thought was the culprit. Another asteroid. This one is actually not an asteroid; it's a comet crash site has been discovered, and that one has been dated to 13,000 years ago, and that one is called the Younger Dryas comet. So we have to issue a
it,
correction in
it
our book.
created it created what's called the Lake Superior Trench or
Yeah,
tranche.
and
Okay,
it wiped out, like I say, all these North American large plains animals were wiped
the
out
vast majority of
at
her.
the
Some
same
some
time.
some
Yeah,
some hung on for a little bit longer, like the giant ground sloth, more in like the California area. So I make the joke that we got 2 out of 3 of them right. It's like we knew that it was Colonel Mustard, and then we knew it was a knife, but it wasn't in Colonel Mustard with a knife in the kitchen. It was Colonel Mustard with a knife in, like,
Lake Superior.
in the bedroom. So, the main facts, the main theories still hold
Yeah.
true. It's just like, oh, you see,
It
we were
just
going
this
off of data
yeah,
that we found back in
at the time, yeah.
2022. That was the Norwegians that had found the crater in northern Greenland. They found it, and they were supposing, because of the younger Dryas and the Ucello horizon, that they all synced up because of the
Yeah,
nanodiamonds.
they discovered in '86, I believe it was, somebody discovered nanodiamonds in the 13,000-year-old soil. Uh, there's a charcoal layer called the younger dry I mean the Ucello horizon, and then under over that is about 1100 years of deposit of called the younger Dryas boundary, and these two soil layers had nanodiamonds found inside of them. And that proved that it was some sort of celestial impact that caused the extinction level
Yeah,
event
an
because
incredible amount of pressure.
And
yeah.
it also
Yeah,
proves too that the Great Flood actually did happen.
Right, we attribute this 13,000-year-old catastrophe to the cause of all the flood myths in all our there's so people don't realize that there's 1,200 separate cultures all over the world that
yeah,
have a flood myth in their most ancient lore, all of which start with, well, and then God warned us that we were about to be killed by a
yeah,
flood and to either build a boat or go to high ground or dig in somewhere, and
In every case, there's pre-knowledge, which
yeah,
tells us right away that we were much more highly advanced, like what Plato was saying about, 9,000 years before his existence of time, there was Atlantis that was
at an advanced
just
city,
close to the
yeah.
close to the pillars of Hercules,
right.
and it is apparently that, yes,
There
well,
is something there. That have you heard
yes,
about the Doñana's bird sanctuary find, Oscar? They found Plato attributes Atlantis to being near the Rock of Gibraltar and not
Yeah,
out in the Atlantic Ocean far away, and not in the Pacific, and not in
in the middle of
at
nowhere, not
this
in the middle
at
of
the South
right.
nowhere.
Pole. Yeah,
Yeah,
It's where it's supposed to be.
and then sure enough, on just up the coast on Spain, of the coast off of the Rock of Gibraltar, there's a bird sanctuary called the Doñana
Bird sanctuary.
National Park, and there's a big river delta there that has an island in the middle that sank at some point, and so they
Ground
did
lidar.
ground penetrating technology there and discovered that sure enough there's these concentric circles and bridges there underneath the Doñana swamp. And out in the ocean, just out of the mouth of the delta, there's all this rock debris, like cut rock debris that looks like a tsunami went into a city and dragged it back out into the ocean,
Which is what exactly would have happened.
and so because we now know that the Younger Dryas comet did strike 13,000 years ago and probably caused huge tsunamis worldwide, we believe that's what is the cause of the Great Flood myths in all of our ancient lore. And if Atlantis was where we think it was ground zero for the tsunamis coming out of the Labrador Sea in the North Atlantic.
yeah,
It would have just been destroyed,
Yeah,
capital D.
apocalyptic. Yeah, apocalyptic,
yeah,
and yes,
Just like it was supposed to be, like it was
yeah.
described.
right. So do you have a question?
Oh yeah, I was just because I was thinking as soon as you brought up the Atlantis theory, I know I remember hearing something about I think Spielberg himself, like taking a voyage and actually finding a type of like red stone that was described it
Oh, yeah,
for
what's it called?
A ti-
Unobtainium or something? A red
no,
metal?
well, no. It's something be like a type of sandstone, because sandstones are often red,
yeah,
or are you talking about more
yeah,
gem like sapphire
it
like.
was very yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was. I wish I had it in front of me so I can tell you exactly. But I know that it was like Spielberg himself. He had the money and he decided to go and like do this research thing and actually came with something that was described from Atlantis, and then I was like, and it didn't become a big
Oh,
I
story.
think
you're talking about orichalcum.
orichalcum. That's the stuff. The red metal that
Yeah,
lines the
Yeah,
orichalcum.
pyramids.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. I'm familiar with
yes,
that. It's mostly zinc and copper with a couple other elements. It was prized by the Atlanteans, and it's something that we ourselves have never actually made. But they found these
But they
bars and
found some of it.
they found
Yeah,
these bars
yeah,
in this old galleon that we don't know quite how many thousand years old it is. But yeah, it looks like these rods,
they really
and
did exist.
these long, skinny
Somebody was
rods.
smelting it at one point.
Yes, orichalcum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it's crazy how you have all these little connections that go through like a bunch of different things. Like you even brought up when it came to the flood stories. They
right.
span a bunch of different cultures. It wasn't just one
Hundreds,
culture.
hundreds
Yeah,
of different ones. Yeah.
Yeah, that never ever had any connection at all. Graham Hancock talked a lot about that in his Fingerprints of the Gods, but he was getting the information from even earlier
Yeah,
texts,
there was a man named
yeah,
Fraser.
just like he talked about
Yeah.
the Perry Reese map a lot too. The one that shows Antarctica without without ice,
yeah,
which
Right.
so it's kind of like that's talk about pointing a finger at advanced technology when point when we're not supposed to have advanced technology.
yeah.
Right.
But that's the beautiful thing about researching these kind of things is that there's this change all the time. You're learning new things as time goes on. Uh, Even when it comes down to things that have happened to yourself, your own personal experiences, you're like, oh, now that I've learned this, it kind of connects something in my head to kind of piece
Yes,
more
that
things together.
Yes, yes.
researching the book, it kept being like that. I'd figure something out, and then that would connect with that, and that would connect with that, and that explains that. And that's when as our theory started to evolve and coagulate into a whole solid thing, I started throwing more data at it again, throwing a data at it and more data at it, and kept trying to find the flaws in the theory, but it kept holding up. It kept standing up, and it makes me think that we could be right. We could be right about
I
who
think
they are and
we
what they're
think
up
we're
to.
pretty. I think we're pretty close to the mark, and also
Yeah,
Leslie's got this brain. Being a Gemini, she likes solving puzzles
yeah,
and she
lots of
likes
puzzles.
mystery. So for her, and she's also spatially very adept. So for her, this is like trying to solve a puzzle.
Thanks,
Okay,
dear.
and so trying to solve a puzzle is exactly what we've been trying to do. Especially
Yeah,
because I got to about the age of 30, where so many of these things had happened to me that I just wanted to find some answers, and the answers that I had been told just were not they were not satisfactory to be able to explain what had been happening to me. So about the age of 30, I really started doing my major investigation. So that was be about 1990, 1991.
right.
I just had a really wacky thing that had happened to me, and and also hearing still what my mom was so good at automatic writing that she knew before anybody else when her mother died, when her father died, and when Uncle Clifford died, all at different times. And
Right.
she was contacted. She went into a trance. And I remember when, in 1969, she picked me up from school, elementary school, and she was just bawling. She was in tears. And of course, I said, "Mommy, what's wrong?" Said, "My mother just died." And her mother and her father had just been over the summer before, and they spent the summer with us in Woodland Hills. And so, I'd also known them anyway because I spent the summer with them in 1969 going to school. So anyway, so I said, "Well, how do you know?" He said, "Well, old Glegley contacted me, and I wrote it down." I said, "Okay."
Yeah, she would go in these trances. She'd feel this overwhelming feeling like she had to write, and she would sit down and go into a trance, and then this words would spill out onto the paper without her even looking at what she was writing.
Yeah, just basically just close your eyes and you just write.
Hmm.
And that's I
Yeah.
saw her do it. And I saw different things she had written about people that she could not have known. But anyway, so a couple days later, we got a call from England saying that your mother had
Yeah, an
died. So
official word comes
my dad
3 days later from
my
England.
my dad
Back then.
believed her, but he didn't because he knew about the whole automatic writing thing. So I said, "Well, we haven't gotten the call."
Yeah.
And then we got a call, and then in 1978, my grandfather Harry Rowe died, and same thing happened where she knew,
And then
and then
Uncle
Uncle Clifford,
Clifford the next year, I think. Yeah.
like a few years later. So this is something, when you're a kid growing up, you don't really tell your friends about this kind of stuff. They think, oh, you're living in a haunted house, or you're
Yeah.
lying, or you're mentally retarded, or whatever it may
Yeah,
be.
they kept it from each other a little bit too. It was kind of like prying. It was difficult to pry their stories out of them sometimes. It wasn't like they wanted to talk about it very much.
It was literally a family secret. But you see,
Yeah.
it also extended to my uncle Douglas. He was a Griffiths, and he was married to my mom's older sister. Now, he told me this a couple different times, and he was a banker. Again, no nonsense. Went through the British Royal Air Force, and he was a very intelligent guy. He told me about when he was in Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, back just after World War II, and they were billeted in the jungle, and like a typical 20 to 40 man tents at the time. And he was awakened in the middle of the night by this tall entity that he automatically knew that this was something different. And this entity said, Douglas, knew his name, number one, said, Douglas, you need to get up right now. You're about to be attacked by rebels and you're going to be killed if you don't leave. And then the being disappeared. And he said, well, okay, that's O'Glegley. So for whatever reason, he just knew intuitively it was Oakley. So he got up and he just basically, well, I'm just gonna leave. So he left the tent, and then sure enough, a raid came through like a couple minutes later, and some guys were knifed to death, others were shot, but it was basically people were killed.
You
And
see,
so,
we think this thing with the family spirit guide. Suppose, like we believe that there's this gray, tall alien handler for the family, old Glegley, and they don't just prey on the family for the genetic material they need. We think they also protect the family. I make an
Yeah.
analogy like a farmer and his cow. The farmer has a cow out in the field, right? And he abducts it every morning into the barn and removes the milk and then puts it back out into the field to make more milk. And the farmer also protects his cow from predators or from danger. It's I kind of get the feeling that this was the family spirit guide and what they were up to. Also, they had this bizarre mental connection with all of their abductees. Uh, Stephen and I both studied meditation and Kundalini raising energy practices, meditation and chanting to vibrate the chakras
in
and
the
open them up.
early mid '90s.
And we studied that for a few years. And we became where we were easily able to astral project. And I had a lot of fun with it. I would go scuba diving while I was astral, or I'd go visit different parts of the world. I went to Egypt one time. But Stephen, it was never comfortable with him. It's almost like ever soon as the veil would come down between the astral world and the physical world, it would be like they were on the other side waiting to bother him or harass him or
Hmm.
uh, sometimes it was menacing and other times it wasn't, but it was always they were just seemed to be like right there on the other side. And so there seems to be a spiritual component to this abduction phenomenon. And I've talked with several different abductees that also report being kind of from a psychic family. That may be one of the criterias of judgment for when they're picking the families that they're going to prey on.
Depending how the brain is wired.
Yeah.
I personally have a feeling that I firstly I I know this for in my in the depths of my soul that what we really need to do is start teaching. Number one, kids should read from books and not off of computer screens, okay? Because it slows down the brain waves down to more an alpha state, so you can actually encode the information. Because we're basically set by the time you're 5 or 6, what you're going to be as far as your personality and whatever you're going to learn is between from 5 to 6 is like the cutoff point. So we cannot be encoding information at 40 brainwave cycles per second when we really need to be encoding it by reading a book. Number two is that we have this inherent ability called telepathy that some people still have, and some people have more or less, and I think what we've been able to find, and science is proving this out, that there are parts of the brain that do control the ability to actually transmit pictures and thoughts and concepts, which is really what telepathy is.
And as
It's
people
transmitting a
do
picture.
and as people
Yeah.
do the work I was talking about, the chanting work and we become more and more psychic the more we do it. And Stephen it was ridiculous. He was pulling whole sentences out of my head
Words that don't
frequently.
even exist, too.
So we believe that telepathy is actually a human trait that has kind of atrophied in us, but has not atrophied in our cousins, the
Yeah.
aliens flying the UFOs in our skies. And we keep hearing reports about how they're launching these ships from the ground somewhere. We hear about them coming up out of lakes, up out of the ocean, up out of volcanoes, out of the sides of mountains. Holes will open up on the side of the mountain, and UFOs will fly in and out of them.
Mount Shasta is a good example.
At Shasta and the Archuleta Mesa. There's been reports from the Native Americans who've lived there for thousands of years that the side of the mesa will open up and a light will spill out and UFOs will fly back and forth in and out of the thing, and then it shuts back down again. And I saw one guy point a heat camera right at that where the supposedly they're opening the opening is.
That was Ben Hansen.
Yeah, he pointed a thermal camera right there, and sure enough, there's a huge heat bloom coming right off that part of the mesa. And
Wow.
this is underneath the Archuleta Mesa is
In New
the
Mexico.
location of the Dulce Air Force Base, which is it's a important place in the ufology community. This is where the Dulce papers originated, and also the Phil Schneider story, the man who was trying to do some underground contracting work for them, and a wall came down, and on the other side there were a bunch of tall gray aliens and reptilians, and they had he on his side he had some soldiers, and on the other side was the
Yeah, he was a government contractor, so he had, other contractors with him,
yeah.
plus,
So they had a firefight battle, and he actually had two of his fingers blown off in this battle, and
Okay. Oh, I
several
know the story you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, so you know
right.
it. Okay.
So that was at the Dulce Air Force Base. But what I wanted to bring up was the Dulce papers. This security guard back in the day, the base is 7 layers deep and levels deep, and the top 5 levels are just human personnel only. But the bottom 2 levels are like a joint alien slash military base, right? And this guard went down into the lower levels where he wasn't supposed to go, and he discovered a room filled with these vats where they were growing grays and hybrids in these vats, gray aliens and hybrid aliens. And I that from that makes me think that's where they're taking the fetuses that they're stealing,
Yeah,
and they
I
at the
was
put
just
them
gonna
fourth
in.
live.
ask if that's what you
Yeah,
thought. Yeah.
Yes, because
yeah,
apparently they need to develop to a certain developmental stage before they can be
yeah.
finished
They're taking it
the
four
finished
months
product.
about.
Yes, but you hear a lot more stories about star children and children being actually being born actually with telepathic and other different types of talents and abilities that a couple of generations ago we would think we're nuts or crazy. I saw a video just not too long ago. It was on, I forget, I think it's on YouTube, of a 18-year-old white boy sitting at a piano just with the perfect posture of a pianist and just playing out a simplistic version of Clair de Lune that was written by Claude Debussy. And he absolutely, you could tell that he understands music and he understands
Yeah.
what he's playing, but sometimes he has to use two fingers to hit a note versus one finger. But he's only 18 months old and he has this intuitive knowledge of what music is, how to play it. And like I say, we kind of like joke around about these movies that are being made about what is the one where they have like this whole school for the mutants.
Oh,
What is
the X-Men
the
thing. Yeah.
X-Men?
Uh,
You know, this is literally something that is really occurring. I mean, not to that level, but the people are. They talk about star children. Literally, you can see that as an example. Human beings, the jaw of the human being has gotten smaller over the last few thousand years because we're not hunter gatherers. We don't have
yeah,
the need for the bigger teeth. We're literally changing.
We're changing a lot.
Our physiognomy, as they call it, our physiognomy is changing because of our diets and different things such as that. So
But there's also this bizarre thing that was came out on Ancient Aliens not too long ago, where they discovered that testing the genes of human beings of 3,000 years old
yes,
ago, we've actually changed about 7%. Our DNA has changed to 7% in
which
the
is
last
like rocket
3,000 years,
speed.
which is enormously fast. It's almost like we're
yeah,
being slowly tampered with. And I think that might have something to do with the breeding program as well. But I also think, well, people ask me what is their purpose for the breeding program, and since we believe that they're cousins to us and not coming from distant star systems, we think it's possible that they're trying to reintegrate with us by breeding their population to look more like ours,
yeah.
and
That makes
that they
sense.
can, they can communicate easier with us and reintegrate with us, possibly infiltrate us to get what they really want. We think they want us to denuclearize. We think that's a very high priority of theirs.
Yeah, what we really strove to do in the book was to lay it out in a manner that actually makes sense, following the logic, following the facts. So we're kind of skimming over things a little bit, but yeah, what we're seeing is that they either want to influence us or to reintegrate so that we basically don't blow up our home planet, which actually has a big meaning to them too,
Right.
because they're not just like I say, they're not going through Einstein-Rosen bridges and going through wormholes and
Yes.
just happen to just care about us and happen to be able to
Yeah,
breed with us. Actually, that they live here
That's
and
one
they've
of the
been
things
living
I
here
like.
for a long time.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about our theory. It also explains why they've been with us and doing things to us and with us for thousands of years. That if they were coming from distant star systems, that just strains credulity that they would come 100,000 times a year, every year from
yeah.
a distant star system. What, they love McDonald's? What, why would
Well,
they?
the way you guys speak on it, it sounds like, um, especially with the fact of you bringing up the spiritual kind of aspect
Yes.
to it all. It almost sounds like they're not only trying to reintegrate, but also reintegrate that connection between people. I mean, we have these internet connections, but we don't have real, genuine connections to each other.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, that's exactly what I see.
that goes ding.
The exactly if you look at it from just even like because I taught Tai Chi for so many years and I was a Chinese medical acupuncturist for over 20. And so a lot of these concepts, that go back to, of course, the very, very basic, the Taoism and the yin yang and that kind of thing is that everything is connected, like Bell's theorem, everything in the world is connected, so we're all connected. Uh, and so the thing is, yeah, right now the world is in kind of like spending too much time in the basal three chakras, like the sex, violence, and anger. And then we have the fourth chakra, which is the balancer. And then you got the more ethereal chakras above that, which are basically love and empathy and
The third eye
intellect
chakra,
and that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So if you spend too much time in the lower basal chakras and you're not balanced, you're going to get a lot more things like we're seeing happening in the world, a lot more division and it's happening. And I think that literally, because they are more advanced than we are, partly they can't understand us and they think we're barbaric. And I think they're
right,
trying to change us from, number one, we're children playing with nuclear technology.
yeah,
Yeah,
And I think that's one of the things that really, really, you can see it in their actions. They
yes.
don't like the fact that we have this power.
When we were hearing the, did you happen to catch the summer congressional hearings with David Grush and the two
oh yeah,
pilots talking?
Graver,
yeah,
Yeah, that was
Graves.
that was big news for us, our ufology community, right? And I heard all of their testimony, all that the public was allowed to hear, and it wasn't news to us that they have crashed spaceships. We knew that. It wasn't news to us that they had biologics, dead bodies, and we think maybe some live ones too for a time. But what was news to us was that the Tic Tac incident and the Go Fast incident and the gimbal incidents, these kinds of UFOs are following our military every single time they go out on maneuvers everywhere around the world. The two pilots testified to that. And I didn't realize that the coverage was quite so complete. I didn't realize that they are dogging our military step every single time they go out, everywhere they go out, every when they go out. And I think what they're doing is that we know that they can neutralize our nuclear weapons. They've done it before. They've proven
Yeah.
it to us that they can. So we think that that's what they're doing, is they're just monitoring our nukes everywhere, all around the world at all times, just to make sure we're not ready to blow up the world.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, especially because there are those stories of them kind of just shutting down those
Yes.
locations.
Yep, or blowing
Yeah,
things out of the sky in a
yeah,
test.
Malmstrom in 1966 in
Yeah,
Montana,
and
and
the
they've
Minot incident
yeah, and
as
they've
well,
done the
and
same thing to the Brits and
yeah,
to the Russians, and they use, and they're also like following the nuclear submarines of all the countries that have the nuclear
yes.
submarines. So this is something that is still basically you're not, it's like a non-disclosure agreement. You're not supposed to talk about it, but some people do talk about it. So yeah, this is happening a lot more, and now everybody has got a camera on their hip, so
Yeah.
they really can't play God anymore. They gotta literally, they used to play God
Now they're
thousands
playing
of years
space
ago. Now they're
alien.
playing space
We
alien.
think,
Yeah.
You know, they're always keep on forcing us to look in the wrong direction. They keep on wanting us to look up
up in the
instead of
sky,
looking down.
down
You
Yeah.
know,
under our feet.
it's just basically
Yeah.
misdirection. So
You,
in our research, it's in the book. A
you know
lot of
when
the
Yeah,
stuff.
and I
uh,
like those questions that you guys pose. They're simple, but in the sense of like what you have behind you is who, what, and why.
yeah,
Those
the
are
big
those are
questions, right?
the perfect
Right.
questions to ask for this type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the books I've read, well, they're about UFO incidents and they describe that incident in minute detail, but they never really then try and surmise the big questions, try and answer the
Yeah.
big questions. Who are these people? Who are flying these craft? Why are they here?
Like for instance, there are little gems that you get when you read different books from different time periods. I read one that when we were doing our book tour up in for Bigfoot days, I came across this one that had all this great information about how frequent like the Pleiades and the different meteor showers were, especially like about 100, 200 years ago. And they used to be literally almost filling the skies at night. It looked like literally a meteor shower. Okay, now we have like these little tiny things that, like you'll see maybe one or two every 5 minutes or something like that. These little gems of information as far as like where people would get, that's why it was called a meteor shower. But that
Yeah.
was had nothing to do with like, with the prevalence of the aliens, but it would just these little things you come across, that's why it's called a meteor shower, because it literally used to look like a shower.
Not anymore. Yeah, now you have to stare for 20 minutes to see a little one, little street.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
Uh,
slowly fading away. It's a shame.
now, during your guys' research and writing this and putting it together, as you're learning more and more, there's that phrase of, you know, when you speak about it, then it happens. Did any of that kind of happen during your research? Did more things start to occur for you guys, or was it just
Oh, it's like the old phrase, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear, kind
yeah,
of thing, where
yeah,
Well,
you speak it and then it manifests.
let me
Go
take
ahead.
this one,
Go ahead,
darling.
Leslie.
So Stephen saw a UFO when he was 10, and then he saw another one in the year 2004. He saw two of them.
Yes.
And his second one that he saw, the first in 2004, was a USO. It came up out of the water off of Malibu, and he can tell you about that in a sec. But um, I was a dutiful wife, and I was believing everything he was telling me.
You're still dutiful, right?
Very, very dutiful. But you know that thing where you just, until you see it yourself, you can only about 95% believe somebody. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
can't 100% believe
And
them.
that's on a good day.
And so and then '05, so I was jealous. He had just seen two the year before that, and I still hadn't seen my first. And then we were driving back home January of 2005, and I was driving and looking up through the windshield, going from Joshua Tree to Yucca Valley,
We're we're heading west.
our home, yeah. And I saw this white light up in the sky in front of me, and we saw it too. And at first, I thought it was a plane flying into Palm Springs Airport, right? But then they were staring at it. There's no running lights. There's no just it was just a round white light. No blinking, flashing lights like you get with planes.
Yeah, I saw it too.
And then it's it got brighter and brighter and brighter, but it just seemed like it was hovering. And I think it was getting brighter because we were driving the car towards it. It seemed so it's just hovering there, and then suddenly it shot off and gone over the northern horizon. It streaked out in a long streak, and the back of the streak followed. And it was in must have been a quarter of a second. It wasn't even a whole half of a second that this thing was gone. I keep describing it to people that it was in the tens of thousands of miles per hour, 20,000 miles an
Yes,
hour maybe.
somewhere in that area.
And
Yeah.
it didn't take off slowly and then gain to that speed. It instantly went at that
Yeah.
full speed that it's so impossible for our aircraft
Yeah, we don't have
to
anything like
emulate.
that.
We
No.
can't do anything like
Yeah.
that. And then at that moment, I suddenly believed him 100%, right? And that's when I had to start the research project. I had to try and answer what these things are. And and Stephen's stories, the uh the UFO, especially the USO, there's supposed to be a underwater base that they've
Yeah.
discovered off the coast of Malibu that looks like a colonnade structure, almost like a Greek column structure of some kind. And sure enough, Stephen saw his UFO.
Yeah,
You keep telling that one.
it
Well,
was go ahead.
before you move on, I just thought
Okay.
it was really interesting. Um, the experience that I had was kind of in the same exact area that you saw your UFO in the sky. Same area, right near Joshua Tree. I was
Joshua Tree,
driving
yeah.
between Arizona and California, um, driving
Sure.
back to California, and I saw a light in the sky, the same as you. And I was like, is that a plane, a helicopter, whatever it may be? And it was kind of just hovering there in the sky. Try to wake up my brother. He's not waking up. Just so somebody sees it with me.
Right. Do you see
And then,
that?
just like you said, in this like really fast instant, this light came from the sky and went towards my car to the point where I felt necessary to swerve.
Whoa. It rushed you, huh?
Um, and then when I looked behind me, I no longer saw. I didn't see tail lights, so it wasn't somebody driving the wrong way
Right.
or anything like that. But I didn't see it again. But I just found it interesting when you said the area that you saw yours. I was like, oh, I saw mine in that same exact area.
It's right in that area.
Yes, in fact the most recent one we saw was it 2020 or 2021?
Yeah, we live in Desert Hot Springs now, which is just over the hill from Joshua Tree. And in
Actually down the hill, yeah.
yeah, we're a little lower elevation than um in but we're kind of like on the same line where we saw it go north. If you had drawn the line south, it would have maybe hit Desert Hot Springs, you know. I
Yeah.
got the feeling like it's traveling along a ley line. We have a ley line in Josh that goes through
Yeah.
this area, and I sometimes think that they catch these ley lines and take off on them like that. And it's just I don't have a lot of evidence for that theory. I
The
just have that idea,
Giant Rock and the Integratron, which are in Landers, which is real close to Joshua Tree.
Yeah, there's a ley line
There's
going
a
right
ley
through
line that
the
goes right through
Integratron.
those two. So
Mhm.
and also too, I can also attest to that the military black helicopters, because I was in the military for 6 years from 80 to 86. But I myself and a group of 6 or 7 other people, we were partying out at Giant Rock for a friend of ours' birthday, and it happened to be a full moon that night, and we had the radio playing, and the girls were dancing, and this is like 2006, and full moon came up, and then these two black objects came just. They were helicopters. You could tell they were helicopters. They're about 200 to 300 foot in the air, and the only reason we could see them is because the full moon was there and they were backlit. And these helicopters, they made this turn right around Giant Rock, and then they went back to the military base. And the thing is, they were absolutely soundless. They made not a single sound. They didn't disturb the air, and they were only 200 to 300 feet up. And if it had been like a dark moon or whatever, or the moon hadn't been up, we would have had no clue that they were
Yeah.
there.
We
So
think they've reversed
we
engineered
do
the
have
ability
some.
of soundless flight because that's what
Yeah.
UFOs always are. They're soundless, or unless people are very close, they sometimes hear a humming sound that is more
Yeah.
felt than heard. But if you're feeling that, you're too close. You
Yeah.
might get this electromagnetic
Right.
radiation burns that
Yeah.
people are
And
talking
the
about
and the
getting.
and the most recent one we saw here was which is in far east part of Desert Hot Springs, and it was around Halloween, but it was 2020, I think it was. We went out into our back porch, was just like this little tiny porch with like really no sky view at all, apart from this
Yeah,
little
in a
tiny piece of
tiny
sky.
home resort. It's
I
a
went out at
little tiny
9:30 at
patio.
night just enjoy the autumn evening, and there was this white object there that was actually fairly big, that was just there
Up in the
in the
sky.
western sky, and it started doing it zigzaggy motions. Again, it was pretty big,
Yeah.
and then it soundless, and then it just did the same thing, shot off to the north. It was
And
almost like saying, "Hi, Stephen Leslie. We know where you moved to because we had just moved, so we know where you are." It's like this, the timing of it in this little tiny space of space,
yeah.
and it was just like right there when we went out.
We don't
It's
see them very often. They happen very often worldwide, but I'm 64 and I've only seen two, so it's not like it happens every day.
right,
But Stephen has seen five now. Um,
and that's even not that many.
and we think the first one he saw may have been actually in connection with his abduction phenomenons because he was being taken by at that point in time
Yeah, yeah, that was the
at that
giant
house.
orange one that was going from south to north. Yes,
Just kind of a big orange globe just cruising along the sky, and
just cruising along. I called Griffith Park Observatory the next night about that, and they thought it was kind of funny. They said, young man, we don't have our telescopes pointed in that direction. We're kind of looking at different things. So, and they had, but really at that time frame in the 70s, there were incidents that were in the newspapers where people were at, say, drive-in movies in Tarzana, and mass sightings of UFO just hovering over the drive-in. Wasn't a blimp, wasn't a balloon or anything like that. It was there were, and then also Rocketdyne was like in our backyard. Our backyard, maybe about 10 miles as the crow flies. Rocketdyne. In fact,
right.
I remember as kids when they used to test the Apollo and the different rockets, they would go off at certain times, and it was interesting that I grew up kind of close to that kind of technology when I was young.
And we saw we saw one thing that I thought, well, is this a UFO or what? But it turned out to later be one of their missile tests,
It was a
for
flare,
Rocketdyne
yeah,
there.
right.
And I started to understand the difference because this one had like a trail behind it, like an exhaust plume kind of behind it. And from what I've researched since then is that UFOs don't do that. They don't have any exhaust coming off of them.
Yeah, I saw that a lot as a kid. I saw a lot of that type, missile tests where these,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was common. So that's
And that one we saw in 2020, you know how our aircraft, if we want to make a U-turn, we have to slowly bank around in a big U shape.
Yeah.
We can't But this craft was making these V turns.
Kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah, like a pointed turn,
Yeah.
at full speed too. No slowing down to then make these complete directional changes at no with no
Yes.
slowing down at all. Once again, completely outside our abilities.
Yeah.
And that's what the pilots describe it as. They said this is not like Russian technology. This is technology on a magnitude, an order of magnitude that's
Well above
much
ours.
higher
Well
than
above.
ours. Yeah,
Yes.
well beyond. Like somehow, for instance, for them to be able to travel, even just their equipment to travel at 20,000 miles an hour
And
from a
then
dead
stop.
stop, um, no physical being could live at that kind of inertia, and the equipment itself
It
couldn't
would be,
survive
yeah,
it.
yeah. Currently, without inertia and inertia
So
dampener
they have to have
or
some
field.
sort of inertial dampening field of some
Yeah.
kind in
You
order to be
figure if
able to
they're
do
if
that.
they're 10 to 13,000 years ahead of us, they would have made some uh, accomplishments and inventions. That's what we're
Right.
doing right now. You look, if we don't get blown up or blow ourselves up in the next 50 years, you can imagine with AI and everything else. We're flirting with 6G technology right now. Wait till we get to 8 or 9.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
the
Well,
the the way we're even thinking and learning is totally different.
yeah, I think the way that they're developing their technology is it in a different mindset than ours. Ours is competing, like
Yes.
Yeah. Yes,
theirs is
we don't
not.
think they have the same social structure as we do at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's quite different than ours.
To survive and to evolve, you would have to evolve also to, like I say, we're still in the barbaric. We're playing around mostly in the barbaric chakras. Who has the most toys wins. That type of philosophy. It's just kind of disgusting in a way when you think about it. We're children playing with weapons that we shouldn't be playing with.
So
Yeah.
when we were writing the book, I had to assume that some people picking up the book would know nothing about the UFO phenomenon, right? And then some people would pick it up knowing all about it. So I did the first chapter was like a crash 101 UFO 101 course in
Pun intended.
yeah, like
Yeah.
UFO activity in the last 80 years. And then chapter 2 was about the latest disclosure policies and how they differ from prior to the 80 years before that. But then at about chapter 3 is when we really get into talking about our theories as to where they're hiding and who they are and what they want from us.
Yeah, it's when you think about it, they are kind of maybe more like disguising and obfuscating as far as their actual existence, because I don't think a lot of people out there would like to think that there's entities that are actually much more advanced than we are that are living literally underneath their feet.
Yeah.
It's more comfortable for people like with the War of the Worlds that came out in 1938, that they Orson Welles, that they were coming from Mars or from some distant place. I mean, to think that they're actually here living on Earth and they've been manipulating and watching us and they're more powerful. I think people are I think they figured it out too, that we're very xenophobic as a race and we don't like to think that there are other things out there in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. and
And I
sorry, go
wanted
ahead.
to just because I apologize for throwing you off of your original story of the USO. I don't know if you
Oh,
still wanted to
sure.
share that.
Oh yeah, the USO. Yes, it was 2004, I believe. I was finishing having dinner. That was when I was still driving back and forth to Woodland Hills as an acupuncturist, and I was having dinner off the Malibu coast at the Chart House, and it was October. I remember it was because I was watching the Yankees and the Boston Red Sox, doing a playoff game. So it was, I'm a baseball fan. So anyway, so I got done with dinner and I asked the valet to get my car for me, and he got my car and was giving me the keys. And we just kind of happened to look out because we were right on the beach, and we saw this USO come up out of the water and just kind of hover there, maybe about 50 or 100 feet above the water, and just kind of stay there for a couple seconds and do some kind of zigzaggy movements, and then shoot off going up the coast to the north. And he looked at me and we kind of had this kind of disbelief look in our eyes. We said, "Well, did you see that?" And he spoke in his broken English, says, "Oh, yes, senor,
Yeah.
I saw that." And so it was just like, okay, but it was like I say, it's when you've seen a few, you're not completely surprised. But if you see one and it actually, then you have missing time on a abandoned road, then it's a different
Yeah.
thing. This one was just there, and it was later after the fact, a few years later, I found out that Malibu actually is a hot spot. I mean,
Yeah, off of
at that
Catalina as
time, at
well.
that time, I did not know. I wasn't expecting. I had no clue, quite frankly.
So,
So
can I go ahead and tell
go
people
ahead,
about
sure.
our Instagram account and stuff
Yeah,
too?
yeah, of
All
course.
right. Again, the book is Who They Are and What They're Up To by Leslie and Stephen Shaw, and it's available on Amazon and Ingram Books as well. And we have an Instagram account. It's leslie.shaw.author. And it's also our handle for the Facebook account as well.
Here's what the
But
book looks
yeah,
like
this is what the book looks like.
over there.
That's right. I'm going the wrong way. There we
Who they
go.
are and what they're up to.
And the on the Instagram account, I'm starting to post videos about stories that people share with us. And also, I did a series on Stephen's family's abduction experiences, and also a series about, um, sometimes they would have these bizarre experiences, but it wouldn't sound exactly like the abduction. So I would put it into the just plain weird category, and I'm right on the middle, putting out that series right now too. So,
Yeah,
and then we do have a website. It's called whotheyarebook.com. And people can find excerpts there and blogs. We wrote some blogs, and also the links to any podcasts that we've done
And
too are there.
we have reels on there too, which are kind of very
That's
nicely done.
Instagram. Yeah, we have
Yeah.
some nice videos that we've posted about the book and about some of the people who've shared their experiences with us.
Yeah, some of the people we're interviewing up in this area, the Joshua Tree and Landers area and thereabouts, have their own stories and actually physical evidence, which is quite interesting. That if we do get around to doing a second book, oh yes, getting close to five, yeah. If we do get around to finishing our second book, we're definitely going to include those. There's a lot
Yeah,
of fascinating stuff happening around the world. I have a good friend. We have a good friend that just got back from doing 2 months in India with a transcendental meditation group, and there are certain elements that form on the body called monoatomic earth elements that only form in certain ways, and it's something that I would like to include in our next book as far as
yeah.
the things
yeah,
we
that's
can achieve.
fascinating.
And we want to explore the Akashic record and also look into what Bigfoot might be and if there's an
Yes,
association
there
with
seems to be.
Oh yeah, because
with
there are tons of stories of people seeing, lights in the sky when
oh
also, yeah,
yeah,
experiencing
after
Bigfoot.
a Bigfoot experience or
Or
before one.
during,
Yeah.
or during one, yes.
So in
Yeah.
fact, I'm trying to find people who have stories like that. So please, if you're listening, and you have a story about Bigfoot and possibly with a UFO encounter as well, we'd be thrilled to hear all
Yes.
about it. Go ahead
I,
and Instagram us
I'm
again.
sorry. I'm going to have to drop out here because I have a commitment here at
Yeah,
five. So
sorry.
Yeah, no
so
It's
Leslie
worries,
can
been
no
such a
stay.
worries.
nice talk. I didn't realize we'd go so long. It's been so nice.
No
Yeah.
worries at all.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
thank
having
you.
us.
Yeah, of course, of course. I want to thank Leslie and Stephen Shaw for coming on. If you want to get their book, the link will be down below. Don't forget to ask questions or face your fears. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Induced Fear. Bye, guys.